Players are on the move each and every day. We're on the move here at the Voice of College Football, so you better be too to keep up with all of it. So we are right here for you every day, Monday through Friday at noon Eastern Time. Leanne Herring and myself tracking the portal updates each and every day, recruiting on the high school level as well. Leanne, how's it going?
It's going good. We gave you guys the weekend off. It was a busy weekend. Of course, a lot of movers and shakers. We have a few big top playmakers finding their homes this weekend that we'll talk about shortly in just a minute. Some top QBs coming off the board. Some wide receivers that are highly coveted, but don't worry if you're still out there looking for a couple top players. There are plenty. We've had some guys enter the portal this morning, so there's a lot of exciting movement going on. Again, we have to remember that while these visits are going on and the portal is still opening up until the 28th, we do have a dead period coming up December 23rd through January 1st. So expect that some of our top guys who maybe are deciding to take more visits or as teams come in and out, that we might see some of these dates be pushed back. As far as some of our top guys, I'm kind of hearing that, that they had a set list of visits, but now as we see them taking visits and we see that, teams may be going in other directions, we're seeing a lot of movement, especially at the running back position. Teams like Ohio State are eyeing 2 blue chip running backs, but we're seeing if the feeling is mutual, and we're going to see a lot of that, Mark, as we head in now, what we are a week in to the portal being open. So as we see players kind of see and feel out where they're wanting to go or where they're wanting to visit, this could be a big factor as far as decision making. I was talking to a couple people, how do we compare transfer portal? Well, I've never partaken in it, but I think the best way to probably sum it up is the way it goes, especially with their players and the agents and programs. It's like speed dating. You have to think that these guys are not necessarily not taking cautious in their decision, but again, they're trying to meet with a lot of suitors over a couple days. We got a lot of guys this weekend that were on campuses Friday, hitting another place on Saturday, Sunday, taking a breather. Sunday was not a day of rest for some of these portal players, and they're already on the move, hitting another team Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and have schedules lined up. So it's definitely the best way I could say to describe the portal as far as where we're going is a lot of speed dating going on. Some already know who's in and who's out. So let's get to see some of the guys that already found their home, and let's talk about hot guys on the move and all those good things we got. We got a guest coming up talking about a little bit of a team that's definitely been on the hunt and had some big commitments this weekend as well.
Got my marching orders from Leanne right here. So she's got a list of news and notes. We're going to run through those. Absolutely. I've got a few things to hit on. We've got a situation at Penn State in particular that I think is even goes beyond the situation with that particular player. And it points to an issue. And this is the first time this has really hit home, where with the college football playoff overlapping with the transfer portal, that this could become a serious issue for a lot of playoff teams. But we will get to that a little bit later. We've got our guy, Kyle Loomis, jumping on from E2C Network. Everyone, get on over there. Check out Kyle's work and the rest of the crew. E2C Network. They talk Auburn football, basketball, athletics, the entire Auburn community, the Auburn family base right there at E2C Network. Kyle, how you doing today?
Doing very well. It was a very exciting weekend for Auburn in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I got to say that some people may have issue with Hugh Freeze going 5-7 back-to-back years, but it's not like he's just taking it lightly. He's certainly on the trail to acquire talent, whether that be a national signing day that was near top 5 in the country, or in this case, of course, the transfer portal. And the big addition, of course, that everybody wants to talk about and hear your thoughts on would be Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think obviously the tea leaves had started falling in the direction of Jackson Arnold as the weekend progressed, and that looked like the likely candidate, at least to make a early decision. Now, there is a speculation out there that Auburn is not quite done yet, and I think something I'm sure we're going to talk about in a second that transpired shortly after Jackson Arnold's decision will influence that maybe future edition as well. But in terms of Jackson Arnold coming over from Oklahoma to Auburn, the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I like this fit. There's a lot of eligibility left for Jackson Arnold. And frankly, Hugh Freeze is one that's been very open about it. He likes to recruit from the high school ranks. And I know that we're not talking about high school in this respect, but that is kind of a similar vein there. You're talking about a guy with 3 years of eligibility that is very well suited to the RPO system that I think could fit very well. And ironically, while this has been an overused analogy, a lot of people are comparing his story to the Bo Nix story, where Bo Nix suffered a lot under what Auburn wasn't able to provide him while he was here, and then went somewhere else and found a better system, a better fit, more support. Jackson Arnold may be finding a very similar scenario coming over to Auburn as they continue to revamp, retool, revitalize this program and surround all the playmakers with great options, obviously in the offensive scheme with the receivers and things like that. But right now, I think there's a lot of probably split down the middle of the fan base of who is really excited about it, who's questionable about it. I think a lot of people had their own opinions about who they wanted Hugh Freeze to get, and he wasn't going to make anybody happy, or everybody happy, I guess I should say. But right now, the way we're heading with that, I really like the narrative that's out there around Jackson Arnold, and it'll be an interesting return trip to Norman, Oklahoma in the very early part of the season in 2025 for him.
No, undoubtedly. And Ole Miss fans can say what they want and have their personal opinions about Hugh Freeze. I started covering when he was just, signed as coach, and that was my Ole Miss beat. The one thing you got to give it to Freeze when he's out there recruiting, he is a master recruiting. Families love him. Mm-hmm. And he's always out there looking for a dime in the rough. And why I like, Jackson Arnold was a kid that we've mentioned a lot here, especially when he played Ole Miss and everything. But he's a kid that I've been watching since high school, obviously came out of a touted program here in Texas, highly developed, but I always say about Texas talent, it's very situational, very conditioned. And despite Oklahoma, having a hotbed here in Texas, it just didn't work out. But I really like this fit for y'all, just because I think that Jackson Arnold really didn't find his foot and his stepping. But I think, we've seen the way Hugh Freeze has developed players, especially at quarterback. And I think, the situation in Auburn, it didn't work out with him for Peyton Thorne and a lot of his quarterback guys. So I see, Hugh Freeze in an Auburn program that's extremely hungry. Jackson Arnold, extremely hungry guy. We saw it against Ole Miss. He was expected to go into that game and not really do anything. And that first quarter, he really kind of showed out, kind of for anyone who's watched Arnold, from his high school career, into his collegiate career, said that's the Jackson Arnold we are familiar with. That's the Jackson Arnold we are fit. So I really like this get for Hugh Freeze, and bravo to him. Like I said, you can have your feelings about, especially if you're an Ole Miss fan, about Hugh Freeze and what he's done, but he's one hell of a recruiter. And I really think that we're really going to see Arnold really break out, because I think hungry Arnold versus Auburn hungry, I think that this is a match made in heaven, and I really do like this pickup. And I think that Auburn fan base should be really excited. It might not be the name that you were looking for, but again, we talk about it here, Mark and I, all the time. Sometimes it's not about going about the names or the highly recruited guys that everyone's chasing. What I like about Hugh Freeze, similar to what Lane Kiffin does, especially during the portals, there's a lot of silent recruiting on. And if Hugh Freeze sees something in this kid, there's something that you want, that there's definitely something that he can cook up. And I really like this match for y'all guys over down in Auburn.
Yeah, I think all the weapons that he's going to be inheriting here at Auburn, especially on the receiver front, is something that's very enticing for him. The system's very enticing. I think when you get away from the emotion of it, whether your guy was picked or not in the transfer portal, you can start to peel away the layers and start seeing this could be long-term even. And I'm a big fan of longevity, continuity, more sustainable and more progress can be made with Jackson as he continues to come into his own at the college. But as you said, high school, look, they look great in high school, and sometimes it takes a minute to translate. It's not always an instant, hey, they come in and they're dominant. There are cases where that happens, but Jackson Arnold, I think, is going to fit really well at Auburn.
So you both make a good point about the eligibility factor here, because some systems, programs out there, Notre Dame could be one, could start to get into a trend of, because they have high expectations to win every year, that they're not necessarily going to trust their quarterback room, even though those guys are highly recruited. They don't have any experience, and you get into this pattern of rent a quarterback every year, get a new guy because you want an experienced, proven guy. where you can build with somebody like a Jackson Arnold, obviously. And again, I just think he was in a difficult situation at Oklahoma. They had their top 5 wide receivers go down this year. They had offensive line injuries and issues early in the season that put him in a bad spot. And he was a much different player once he had that rough go, got benched, came back 3 to 4 games later, and then finished the season as a much better quarterback. My question to you, Kyle, is because we have to think about this in layers, that the initial response is, okay, do you like this player? Do you want this player playing for you?
Sure.
And then the next question that has to be asked is, who else is this affecting on the team? And is this pushing somebody else to make a decision?
Yeah.
And therefore, of course, last week we saw Hank Brown make a decision. He's going to Iowa. Now we see a decision with Walker White.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just in regards to those dominoes falling, was that a direct correlation, do you believe?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to make those dominoes fall in that way, those pieces to line up. The puzzle seems to fit pretty correctly, doesn't it? It seems that on the surface, you saw a guy with a lot of eligibility, a lot of high regard for him, switching over in the SEC and coming over here. And then you see another highly touted and highly regarded, and some people were even saying, and probably I was in that camp as well, the future of Auburn at quarterback and Walker White, make the decision. Once that decision made only a few hours later, which shocked me, frankly, to go into the transfer portal. And it was a little interesting. If you followed the social media for Auburn that day, they even put out this graphic talking about the room that they had in Jackson Arnold, Deuce Knight, who just came in with this 2025 class, and Walker White, and had to obviously retract that. So I think this caught them off guard as well. So I think on the surface, yes, it is a question of, are you pushing someone out by bringing someone in? But I also would caution people to not jump on that train as well, not to get too personal in his own business thing. But a lot of people are aware of this, that his mother is battling cancer. And I would imagine if he does end up going somewhere closer to home, that might have been part of this decision as well. But even if it wasn't, everybody's got to make their own choices and what they feel is best. And that doesn't mean that's a lack of character or a lack of desire to compete and anything like that. It really is just everybody's got to make their own choices. And I see nothing wrong in the decision for Hugh Freeze to bring someone he felt like as a good evaluator talent that is going to help this program move forward even quicker, as it has a little bit of a slow pace in that progress. But I also don't fault Walker White for taking the decision, even in a quick nature, it seemed for us as the fans on the outside, and making that decision to go in the transfer portal. I hate it, but you kind of understand it if you're able to take a step back from the emotion from it.
Now we're living kind of like in the day and age, and you kind of alluded to it, Kyle, the fact that in the SEC, I feel like there's this all, I call it, there's this instant gratification. Like SEC fans want it now, boosters want it now. So there's not that patience anymore to wait the long haul. As much as you see the vision, as much as you win, as much as you lose, I feel like in the SEC, there's just always this high demand from coaches, for the coaches, for the players to produce, despite not, do we want to win, do we want to win the games, or do we want to win the long haul? And I think, like you said about, Walker White and the situation and all those kind of things, I think when it comes to the quarterback position, we've seen it throughout the SEC, even at Ole Miss, nowadays with the age of NIL, and I'm sure you guys see it at Auburn all the time, kids don't sit and wait. And it's not because, they can't bring to the program or they don't love the program, but they also, it's a business now. And, they also have to realize and work, maybe this is not the home for me because I'm trying to improve my draft stock, or I need showing time, because we all know that the shelf life in this day and age is a lot shorter, and the money comes into play. So I know, especially at the quarterback position, you see a lot of people get hesitant, because they think when you have more than one elite quarterback, are we going to this two quarterback system? But I feel like in this day and age, you have to have depth. We see it all the time, especially in the SEC with the kind of schedule we play. No matter where you start, we finish. I mean, the to go healthy in the SEC is difficult. So if you don't have depth at quarterback, which is a key position, we've seen it, how quickly teams fall apart. So I always find it interesting, how fans especially react to the fact that why are we bringing in so many quarterbacks? But I always say, why not? Because what happens when your main guy goes down, or, you're trying to stay healthy down the long haul? And, nowadays you got to run so many different packages, so many different looks. It's not always your top guy that can fit every spectrum, especially like you said, when you run an RPO.
Yep, definitely. And look, it's a little bit jarring for Auburn fans because if you look at the entire quarterback room is different. Hank Brown's gone, Holden Gardner's gone, Walker White now gone, and of course Peyton Thorne has moved on, graduating or I guess 5th year graduating at this point with the last years of eligibility you have. So it's a completely new quarterback room. You only have 2 in it as of this point with Jackson Arnold and Deuce Knight. That's why I said earlier, you can expect a third now from somewhere. Where that is, anybody's guess is going to be, because you got 2 younger guys with a lot of excitement around them. Are they ready? We'll find out. I think Jackson Arnold answers that question a little bit more than Deuce Knight, just kind of talking about what's most likely. High schoolers don't typically come in and just wow us completely out of the start. It happens occasionally, but who else is going to come in? I honestly have no clue. My gut tells me they need someone with a little bit of veteran leadership that can compete, yes, with these younger guys, but maybe is not the heir apparent when he comes in. But if he somehow beats out the younger guys when he comes in, hey, more power to you. You got to, like you said, a full room that is going to serve you very well if someone gets hurt, which frankly has happened a lot for Auburn, more than I would like it to in the past couple of seasons, where we've had to change out some quarterbacks because of injuries and things like that, or just struggling.
Kyle, it also came out today that Amaris Williams, and this is one of the things that turns people off in regards to the high school recruiting portion of this, because the thought process now is, okay, we get excited about all these 4- and 5-star guys, but how many of them are going to truly, there was always the boom or bust factor, of course, just whether a player is going to pan out. But now is the player going to pan out? And even if they pan out, are they going to pan out somewhere else? And Amaris Williams obviously had a ton of hype. He was a top 100 player, is a 4 or 5-star, depending on your service, and didn't produce a whole lot in the field at this point in his career, but he moves on to the transfer portal. So this is another aspect of this is right. You see guys that are highly recruited out of high school. They don't get on the field or feel as though they might be able to produce and get on the field somewhere else. And so they're off and running.
Yeah, and it's a balance of you bringing all this new talent. A lot of people expect somebody to come in and start right away or see a lot of playing time, and so you have to ask the question, if a current player, am I best suited to be, or whether we're talking about Amaris Williams. There's been a couple of people in the transfer portal that I think, I want to say shocked, but just kind of made Auburn fans like move their heads to the side and go, what's going on there? One of those was tight end Micah Riley, who he got a touchdown this year, has seen a little bit more playing time. And with the amount of depth that is leaving the tight end room, it looked prime for him to take over in a sense. But if you go and look at context, you see that he was one of the last few Brian Harston guys that was brought in under his. So with the transition continue to take place under Hugh Freeze, you kind of make some sense there. So whether we're talking about Amaris Williams, whether we're talking about Michael Riley or whoever else, I mean, there's TJ Lindsey's another guy that's gone at the defensive line for Auburn to the transfer portal. That one also shocked me a little bit too. But, he wasn't getting a lot of playing time, and there's more talent coming in to take that playing time. And who knows who else is going to come in this transfer portal. So it's a balance. It is frustrating to watch at times, but I always believe in looking at a little bit deeper and finding out what that context is there to understand why these players and sometimes coaches, obviously with bringing in people in the portal, the decisions that are made.
Kyle Loomis, ETC. No, go ahead, Leanne.
No, I was going to ask you, since we were kind of talking about rooms, and I mean, there's one guy we've been talking a lot about here, and he's kind of a national topic, obviously not too down far the road. Georgia Tech wide receiver, Eric Singleton. He's been a guy who's been on everybody's board. He made a visit to Auburn. He just left Ole Miss this weekend, heading to Texas. He's got a lot of guys on his track. What are you kind of hearing from the Auburn insiders as far as how that visit goes? I know what all the Ole Miss people are saying it's probably similar. Everyone always says, hey, we had a good visit, but kind of an insight, because, a lot of the offensive coaches, have a familiarity with bringing him in, have recruited him from other places. What are you guys hearing about how how that visit went, or, kind of any intel as far as where Auburn stands with Eric Singleton?
Well, no, and no extra intel or anything that you're already not seeing out there. I think it's going to be a challenge to convince him when he's going to look at so many different potent offenses. Ole Miss, you brought up, is going to be one that obviously, it plays a factor in that as well. I think if you're Eric Singleton, you look at where your best opportunity to showcase your talents and where you can be that superstar. If you look at Auburn, they brought in all this young talent at wide receiver this last year, the Freeze Four, as they were called. And a lot of them got on the field and a lot of them showed out. But Keandre Lambert-Smith was brought in and had probably the best wide receiver year that an Auburn guy has had in quite some time. So I look at that model, and even with Cam Coleman continuing to raise up in prominence here at Auburn and say, they're still young. Can I be a guy that comes in alongside this with my experience and have a great year like Keandre Lambert-Smith did as well? It does feel like that conversation has cooled a little bit in terms of just the discussions. And of course, that's just the nature of after they get done with their visit and they start going other places, people start worrying, is this actually going to work out in our favor? But you got to think about the hype that's being built around the quarterback room, whether we're talking about Arnold, or we're talking about Knight, or whoever else is going to come in there. We all know that the quarterback play could have been better. That's going to entice a guy like Singleton. Seeing the model that we talked about with Keandre Lambert-Smith and working this last year at Auburn, and just the system, if it's a good fit for him. So right now, no extra intel or anything like that, but I think Auburn's got a good shot at him.
Kyle Loomis, E2C Network. It's your destination for everything Auburn right here on YouTube. Kyle, we appreciate you stopping by. And with the way Hugh Freeze works, we might be knocking on your door here pretty soon.
I would imagine we'll be talking quite a bit. So I'll be looking forward to that. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks for coming on.
All right. Really good stuff out of Kyle. And of course, Auburn with a new quarterback. They've lost 2, but they think they have their starter for 2025. Actually, with Peyton Thorne gone, they've lost 3 quarterbacks here in the last week. And again, I want to we'd like to hit on the Bo Prabula situation at Penn State, and then also John Mateer, the Washington State quarterback, just entered the portal. But Leanne, I would like to run down your list. So if I can hit each one of these items, and then you can kind of respond to
let's go. Yeah.
what you have here. And so we'll run this down, folks. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave those in the chat. So we've got, of course, over the weekend, we had Miller Moss from USC going to Louisville. That was much anticipated in regards to where he was going to land. And I got to tell you that I heard all sorts of destinations, but turned out to be Louisville. So Jeff Brom, definitely a quarterback developer, one of the best offensive minds in the game, one of the best play callers. And so he had Jack Plummer 2 years ago that he brought with him, that he had a connection with from Purdue. And then it was Tyler Shook, who played at Texas Tech and Oregon. And now he goes and gets another veteran quarterback who's obviously got almost a full year played at USC.
No, and this is a great fit for Louisville. This is another team that I've covered and for a while, and have watched the development. Brom coming in, like I said, when the team was having, when football was kind of like, across the way in Lexington, not really irrelevant. I mean, Louisville's always been known as a basketball school, but kind of when the program basketball wise had its ups and downs, it was time for football to shine, and Brom really capitalized that. And what you got to love about it is he's brought in Louisville's really had a nice run this year, especially in the ACC. Not maybe the way that it turned, but they had a lot of quality wins, a lot of in-state big talent, 4 or 5 stars committing. And I think what I'd like here is Louisville's one of those teams that's not afraid to take chances on young talent. And I think that they're kind of finding that good formula of getting a lot of local Midwest guys, regional guys that are star talent out of, Indiana, within the state of Kentucky, also, Ohio and other places, and bringing in a lot of quality guys to help surround him. And I think that's what's enticing to a quarterback, like him, because he's got a lot of young talent, but a lot of young successful talent, a lot of young local talent who's kind of grown up, surrounded by the Louisville program. So I really like this fit for Brom and what he's doing here. So that'll be an exciting to see. As you said right now, Brom is known for being another quarterback developer, and I really like this mix of surrounding an experienced veteran quarterback to kind of take the signals, to be the lead guy around some of the young talent that I think is going to step up big for Louisville. So I imagine it's going to be a strong spring season, and I expect Louisville to make another strong run in the ACC this year.
Absolutely. Jeff Brom's one of the best coaches in college football, no doubt. You've got a note here that Texas Tech wide receiver Micah Hudson, who just finished up his freshman year there with 8 catches, moves on to Texas A&M.
Yes, he didn't go too far. Another really highly coveted wide receiver. There was a lot of guys, a lot of teams, program suitors, but he didn't go. He went from guns up to gig 'em. I'm not really surprised considering, his roots in Texas and everything. Texas A&M, of course, is looking to build on portal talent, bringing in a lot of talent in the next coming weeks. They signed a really strong recruiting class. They have some really top guys coming in from 2026 that I think. So I really like the addition of Micah Hudson. Another team that's willing to kind of balance that portal talent. But I like this fit. I think, like I said, didn't go too far from home. But again, it'll be interesting to see. But I think what Elko's building in Texas A&M, I think they're trying to find, maybe third time will be a charm, because they've had elite recruiting classes both in the high school and the portal the last 2 seasons that we really haven't seen pan out. We've seen a lot of the top guys kind of fall to injury. We've seen the quarterback situation not really be, but I think they finally got a handle. At least looks like Marcel Reeve's going to be back. Is their guy. We see a lot of young guys from that first initial portal class who have stuck it out. Top guys, Reuben Owens at running back. He was a kid that I followed. Talked a lot about, former 5-star, was out this season, looking to come back in the spring season. So I think with the guys that are coming back from the previous recruiting classes with the portal mix and everything, I think this is going to be a good company that Micah Hudson's going to have with Marcel Reeve, looking to be their guy. I think he's going to be another top target, and I like this fit for the Aggies.
Florida pulled off an upset against LSU this year, but about a month later here, we've got LSU winning this one for 4-star edge Jack Pyburn, who had a nice season in the Swamp with 60 tackles and 4 TFLs, but he's going to LSU.
Yeah, LSU is really, despite the programs, the ups and downs, again, LSU has done a heck of a job maneuvering in this transfer portal. I think, with all the hot seat implications, with all the pressure coming from the boosters, I think that it was kind of fight or flight, and they definitely are putting up a fight, getting some key guys we've seen over the last couple of days commit. This is not a kid that was highly talked about, but again, another 4-star edge. In Pyburn, I think this is going to be another great fit. I like this fit because he's another SEC player. He's had a little bit of experience, didn't see a lot of action, but I think going to LSU, we definitely will see him more of as a fourth. I think he will continue to build an LSU defense that we saw struggle early on, especially at the end position and whatnot. But we saw slowly elevate, and and I think that this is a good move for them as far as development, continue to build their depth. So I think another strong win for LSU. Like I said, the defense had its challenges, but they showed later in the season, what they can build upon. And I think they're just trying to, fill in some key pieces. And I like Pyburn for this because, like I said, another SEC player who's had a kind of taste of what LSU. So I think he can bring a lot to the table as far as the future of building in the defensive side of the ball at LSU.
LSU fans not happy with 8-4, and obviously that's not what Brian Kelly was hired to do, is win 8 games a year, making as much money as anybody in college football. So he's going to work here. So we got the Jack Pyburn move from Florida to LSU. We also have Barian Brown, of course, one of the wide receivers that we talked about extensively last week, caught 122 passes at Kentucky. But Leanne, of course, his next catch is going to be as an LSU Tiger.
Yes, he is going to be a Bayou Bengal, the dynamic duo coming out of the Bluegrass, Barian Brown, Dane Key. We thought that maybe we see him at a place like Ole Miss, Barian Brown, obviously. And Dane Key's coming off a fresh visit to Oxford, but he, of course, has a lot of suitors. Will the Bayou Bengals go after him? Don't be surprised. It doesn't hurt that Barian Brown, another go-to guy, kind of a pair that, like I said, were the key targets for that Kentucky Wildcat offense. It had a little bit of success, but also found a lot more struggles, very Jekyll and Hyde. But like I said, LSU was put on the hot seat, and I think that Brian Kelly's going out there, showing that even though LSU's had its ups and downs, Death Valley is still a key destination for top players. So I expect that Barry Brown will be another instant impact player to continue to help this LSU offense grow and try to kind of settle back into it. But like I said, don't be surprised if we see Dane Key, take a look over there to Death Valley and to LSU.
Yeah, the wide receiver position, especially impressive. We talked about Eric Singleton. We talked about the Kentucky two with Brown and Key, and then you got Casey Concepcion. Of course, we highlighted him a number of times last week, a guy that was the ACC Freshman of the Year 2 years ago, caught 53 passes last year, and he's had a nice visit to Bama, and he's also headed to talk to Dion.
He is. Like I said, those seem to be the two schools at the forefront as of now. Everyone's talking, of course. Bama fans said that they couldn't be happier with the visit. Talking to them, they feel like it's a good fit. He really enjoyed his visit from what I'm hearing. But again, they are only the pre-show. He heads to prime time, and like I said, Colorado is going to be the place to watch. They are hosted and are hosting a lot of key playmakers on both sides of the ball. And it doesn't hurt that they just produced their Heisman Trophy winner that we all knew was probably going to be the guy, Travis Hunter, of course, this past weekend, Saturday. I know everybody was pulling for their guy. We had the Boise State running back. Of course, we had, Oregon quarterback and some other guys in there in the mix. But again, I think it doesn't hurt that Travis Hunter just won the Heisman. We all see what Dion can do. And, we talked about some of these guys, the way that they're committing or some of the visits that they're taking. You see some of these high-profile guys going to schools. We have some guys going to Texas Tech. We have some guys going to Colorado. We have some guys coming off visits to Wisconsin, some of our top quarterbacks, having good visits. And I think a lot of people have to realize in the transfer portal, what's really unique is a lot of these guys, they may not have a long shelf life. They may not have a lot of eligibility, but they're also looking not just as necessarily why financially am I pay off, but also, again, especially at the quarterback position, especially some of these guys that don't have a lot of eligibility mark or some of these wide receivers, they're going to a place where they know that they're going to play and they're going to get a lot seen, not because they're trying to be selfish, not because they're trying to be a ball hog, but they're probably getting ready to go to the NFL. And we all know how the NFL works. If you're not seen on tape, it's really hard to get your draft stock up. It's really hard to get teams to buy into you, to want to invest in you if there's not a lot out on you, similar to what we see on the high school circuit. A lot of top kids that we say, how come nobody's on them? How come nobody's seen them? Because they probably haven't been recruited, because no one's going out there. No one sees them on tape or no one's seen them on person. So a lot of these guys we see going to places like Colorado, going to Texas Tech, Wisconsin, some of these other programs, Arizona State. We see Arizona State getting a lot of momentum with some key guys just because of the kind of season that it's had in the later half. So, so I suspect this is only going to go. But like I said, Casey Concepcion is a guy we've talked about. You went on and on about him. I think he's another high-value player. Two teams to also watch in this recruitment, of course, Texas A&M. Texas A&M is bringing on a lot of wide receivers, but you can never have too many wide receivers, especially when you have a talent like Marcel Reed and how competitive the SEC is getting. But also be surprised, Miami's kind of getting on a roll with some of these key players on the wide receiver and the running back position especially. They're going hard, and they're willing to invest a lot of money in some of these wide receivers and running backs. So expect Miami to be in the hunt for his services as well.
We see a note there coming down from 247 Sports in the last day that Ball State wide receiver Cam Pickett, he caught 49 passes for Ball State last year. He is committed to Kansas. So the next guy on the list here, we've got Tacario Davis, who's had 2 productive years as a starting cornerback at Arizona, 76 tackles in his career, but he might be headed to somewhere, maybe in the ACC, maybe in the SEC.
Yeah, he's another talented guy that we talked about. Arizona, of course, had a lot of momentum later in the season, so we'll kind of see how he plays out. I'm trying to think. I know Emmanuel, but I can't think of the last name. He's also another highly talented teammate, Tacario Davis, so that's another close one to watch that I think that we'll be heading on to. But like I said, 2 teams to watch for Tacario Davis. Seeing the lead guys, we just kind of mentioned him, Miami and Texas A&M.
All right, next up on the board here, This one surprised me, although who should be surprised by anybody entering the transfer portal these days? But Justice Haynes, of course, was one of the highest rated running backs coming out of high school. And it's not like he hasn't seen the field. He has been, sharing duties with Jam Miller at Alabama, but playing a starting role most of the time. But yeah, he's in the portal. And he probably will stay in the SEC, although there's all sorts of huge programs going after him.
There are. And of course, Ole Miss, despite its quiet maneuvering, has maintained its #1 transfer portal. And they, of course, are going to go after. Running back has been a key position. This is much like a position, like I say, like the offensive lineman that doesn't get a lot of love. But now we're seeing, especially in the RPO type offenses, what a critical thing it is and a necessity, not just to have one or two, but even three solid running backs. And I say this, Mark, because running backs, traditionally you look for running back, you want them to be fast. But nowadays you use a running back in so many other elements when it comes to having a strong run game. And we saw in so many critical red zone situations where the running back or having a big bodied running back made a difference for some of these wins and even in some of these losses, how they utilize that. And Justice Haynes is one of those. Ole Miss, he's setting up a visit, but ironically, kind of surprising, a team that we haven't heard a lot about making maneuvers in the portal, but that's definitely a team to watch in his recruitment is South Carolina. That will be a team to watch. We all see what success that Shane Beamer has had in his wacky, crazy world that only he and those South Carolina Gamecocks can operate. But hey, if it works, it works. It's no surprise that Hayes would have his eye on that, is setting up a visit. Another team to watch, obviously, would be Florida. Of course, we've talked a lot about DJ Lagway, the turnaround that the Florida Gators kind of had when he became his guy. Believe me, DJ Lagway's a guy that is very vocal in the guys he wants to have, even though he's really young, even in high school. He was really vocal about the necessity of having go-to receivers. So I don't see any surprise that DJ Lagway and Billy Napier would be advocating and trying to get in the race. Of course, a team in the Big Ten that we're going to talk about, that we just talked about, Michigan, of course, is in the hunt. Now we're hearing that Ohio State, of course, trying to up the run game, trying to improve the run game. We saw the hesitation this year, despite that $20 million roster that Ohio State has managed to build. They still can't find success, Mark, in having a strong run game. So they are looking at Haynes. However, they are also looking at the other couple blue chip backs, including one we are going to talk about next. So we're not sure as far as on the Haynes camp if there is a mutual kind of maybe that they want to look at the Buckeyes yet, but we know that the Buckeyes, as far as the program is concerned, does have strong interest in trying to court Justice Hayes. However, we don't know if Haynes will take a visit for them because, like I said, Ole Miss seems an ideal place, and we all know what Ole Miss has done at running back, and right now Ole Miss is looking to replenish, its running back room. South Carolina, of course, is an interesting place. Just because kind of how the kind of season they ran. And then, Florida, obviously, when you have DJ Lagway as a signal caller, you want a strong, swift. I mean, Justice Haynes, like you said, it's not like he's a guy who hasn't had any reps. He's been doing, he's doing his service over in Tuscaloosa, putting fire in that red zone. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. And kind of moving on, another highly touted with Texas roots out of Manor, Texas in high school is USC running back Quentin Joyner. He just visited Ohio State. So this is kind of, some of the things we're talking about, that come into play. We know that he's a highly coveted running back. So that's another question why Ohio State may not be in the running for Justice Hayes. Quentin Joyner had a really strong visit. Is there room in the board for two really elite blue chip guys? We shall see. Ohio State's not going to turn it down. But again, Quentin Joyner, highly touted running back out of Manor, Texas. He's one of those, of course, that is going to take a leap of faith because he also wants to get some playing time, and he's going to go back to his Texas roots. He will be making a visit to Lubbock and Texas Tech. So watch out for Texas Tech to maybe have a little bit of pull. Like I said, with those Texas roots, there's a lot of Texas ties with that, down in Lubbock that could sway as far as NIL and also being an instant impact player, which really might, entice Joyner to pick a place like Texas Tech, because remember, despite the struggles in Ohio State, the running back room, they still have some key players at the running back position, some that Ole Miss might know very well as well. So that'll be an interesting recruitment to watch. And kind of wrapping it up, another wide receiver, OU wide receiver, obviously Nick Anderson has become the heavy favorite as another possible LSU commit. They feel really good about it. They feel like after this visit that they've kind of gone in the lead, and they feel very strong that he's going to commit. But don't get too excited yet, because he's going down, of course, to Texas A&M and College Station. While there may not be a lot of College Station that meets the eye, there's a lot of good football that goes on there. And again, with Marcel Reed taking that anchor, there's a lot of enticing things about College Station and what Mike Elko's doing to build this offense. And that's a place where, you see a lot of wide receivers. We talked about Aaron Gregory, already at 2026 out of, Douglas County, Georgia, committing there, 4-star. He's all, and when you see that even in a place like Texas A&M, where there's a lot of elite wide receivers going, that Mike Elko, along with, that offense, with his offensive staff, are going to find room, and they're not going to turn down these kind of high caliber players. So we'll see, like I said, if third time's a charm down in Aggie land, and if they can get some more Gigums on the field. So that's kind of where we stand as far as guys are on the move and what we're talking about. But I know you want to talk about a really interesting situation going down at Penn State, which I think is something that, we're trying to bring more kind of behind the scenes of, the not so happy side or exciting side of where, teams stand as far as recruiting goes and their current rosters, and how you build a roster and try to keep your guys happy. So I'll let you take the reins on that one, Mark.
Yeah. So folks, please subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate the like, and of course the super chats available for comments and questions. And if we went through every player that's entering the portal or taking visits, we would be here all day. So check out the various team channels, because our various hosts on those team channels, with over 30 channels, they are on top of it, and they are posting videos and live streams and talking with all of you about your specific team. But just to highlight a couple guys here, this Danny O'Neal, he was the starting quarterback at San Diego State. He's just a freshman last year, 63%, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks. He's moving on to Wisconsin, who is also in play for the Maryland quarterback, Billy Edwards, who's looking at Michigan as well, but it's Wisconsin, and he's got a few other visits lined up. And also, this Penn State situation that really calls a different issue into play here. So Bo Prabula, if you're familiar with him, folks, so he's the backup quarterback to Drew Aller at Penn State. But he wasn't the typical backup quarterback this year. He got a ton of playing time because they would bring him into games, key situations, red zone packages. So he wasn't just, I'm the backup quarterback, the starter never gets hurt, I'm just sitting on the sideline. No, he was impactful for 5 to 10, 12 plays a game, being the starting quarterback on specific run packages. Well, Drew Aller, who many expected to move on to the NFL because he'd probably be a first-round pick, has decided to come back to Penn State in 2025. So then Bo Prabula makes the decision, well, I got to be a starting quarterback somewhere. So he's made his announcement to leave Penn State. And just to look at his statement here, he grew up in Pennsylvania. It was always his dream to play at Penn State, wearing the blue and white the last 3 years. So he's invested a lot of time there. But as he says here, the current postseason model creates a challenge for student athletes. And so the college football playoff overlaps with the transfer portal, has turned it into an impossible decision. And so he's made a decision to move on and enter the transfer portal, because he's got to set himself up for the next season. Penn State has lost its backup quarterback, and not just its backup quarterback, a guy that plays about 10, 12 plays a game at the quarterback spot in certain packages because he would have finished out the season normally. So it's not a guy that's chosen to bail on his team under normal circumstances, but they could be playing until January 20th, and he's got to find another school and enroll. So these are going to be the kind of decisions we're going to see have to play out going into the future unless they figure some kind of different schedule and different calendar.
And that's one of the things we kind of alluded, because you said a lot of the coaches kind of before we got into the season, when we knew we're going to go into playoffs. I mean, there was even with the new early decision for the high school, there was always, that's why they moved that calendar, because they were concerned, you got kids preparing, you got college teams, in the height of conference championships playing for playoffs. You got kids that are, in state championships. So there was always that kind of concern already happening with the movement of when are we going to put this early signing day? When do we put it? Where do we move it? And now we're going to see it with the portal here. And that's something I talked about early on. This is going to be something, like you said, we're going to see more, because this is not your typical transfer. This is not a kid similar to like Justin saying, this is not a kid that's not a bench warmer. This is not a kid that's, putting on a headset, trying to boost up team morale. This is a guy who's been an intricate part, like you said, in certain packages for Penn State. And they're in the playoffs right now. And and how does that leave Penn State? Because as much as they rely on their starter guy, this is a guy who's made an impact. This is a guy that they've also centered their offense around. And now he's got to look for another home. So I feel like this is another problem that we're going to run into. And I know that we talked about that we're about to have the portals open to the 28th. And obviously, if coaches are fired or if they leave or there's some kind of special rules, of course, players will get 30 days within that time frame, aside from the 28th, to be able to move, shake wherever they need to go or to stay put. We've seen some guys kind of regress, decide that they're going to stay, which is very rare. We've had more of that last season, less of that this season. But we do have that, that dead period, or, as they call it, quiet period, whatever you want to call it, which is never dead. It's never quiet. You just can't really have in-face contact, but there's a lot of business going on, from the 28th to the January 1st. I know that they put that in to try to say, okay, well, these are teams preparing for the playoffs. It's kind of give everybody a break, but it never stops. So this is going to be interesting more how, like you said, this is a player who has not been sitting on the bench. He's been an intricate part. Their team's making the playoffs, and it's going to go into question now. How are we going to make that balance of when you're those kind of playoff teams? And I know some coaches showed concern. Hey, we're trying to prepare for a playoff. The portal's opening. So, I get that we're getting to playoffs, but we kind of are a leg down because those other teams who are not playing in playoffs, even though they're playing on bowl games, which is a lot easier, I believe, to maneuver the portal when you're playing in a bowl game versus getting prepped for a playoff game, because, some of they're coming up right here, and, some of the bowl games are far stretched. So this will be an interesting thing, a dynamic. But like I said, this portal is going to be a lot different now that we have a playoff system intact and how that goes. But it's a lot of roster management, because I said that from early on. How do you keep your guys like a player like this that you get playing time, you centered your offense around? How do you keep them? Because these situations are going to happen, and not just at the quarterback position. They're going to happen at other key positions. So we're going to see a lot of teams that, even though they've made the playoff run, and that's great for recruiting, that's a great boost, for boosters that want to invest. But this is also the downside of it, that you might lose some players that have been your veteran talent or been a part of your system because, they're looking for other aspirations, whether it's to be the top guy or whether, they just feel like they need something different.
And again, we've seen all sorts of players enter the portal from playoff teams, but they're guys that not that they can't see the field or not that they're not playing some type of role on special teams. But this is the first guy that came to light for me that it just kind of hit me. Okay, wow, this is a guy that would otherwise be staying with his team through the end of the season and through the postseason. But since we've extended this playoff so far into almost like Super Bowl territory, late January, that he's got to say, well, I don't want to play like one game and then we win, and then I have to bow out and I have to make a decision. So I have to look at my future and I can't finish the season. And this is the issue that we're going to have going forward. And then just the other guy that I wanted to highlight here before, if you have anything else, Leanne, would be John Mateer. He's the starting quarterback at Washington State. So this is just coming down in the last hour that he has entered the transfer portal. And this is a guy that Washington State, even though Mike Leach, obviously, God rest his soul, moved on from there in 2021, basically just kind of continued that Mike Leach system of throwing the ball like crazy. And so John Mateer has been a guy that, as you can see there on the screen, 5th in the nation in total offense passing, and accounted for 44 total touchdowns. So highly productive player that, much like we see the San Diego State quarterback who had a nice freshman season, and then boom, he wants to jump up to the big time, go to San Diego State. You have some success, and he gets an opportunity at Wisconsin with Tyler Van Dyke hitting the transfer portal, and Braden Locke, Wisconsin's backup quarterback, not having the best of years. He sees an opportunity. John Mateer, Washington State's got a nice program, but I'm sure he's going to elevate his status and move up maybe to a Big 10, ACC, SEC, or Big 12 school.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of this as far as like with key positions like the quarterback, much more like an NFL model. Like we said, we've seen a lot of successful quarterbacks that have had the longevity in the model in an NFL. And a lot of these guys that are aspiring to get there, they come from schools like that. And I think as we, with this, expansion of the playoff, with the way NIL is and going, we're going to see a lot of guys, especially like a quarterback running position, cornerbacks on the defensive side of ball. Some of those guys that are impact players, that maybe at a high school were highly touted but didn't get recruited because, there's a lot of guys that we don't talk about on the West Coast, Midwest, and even the East Coast that are highly talented. But a lot of the times we don't hear their names in the SEC because coaches aren't going out to those regions. We got to remember, as much as the staffs have grown and every coach has his region, you can't go out there and see every high school talent everywhere because you still got obligations during the fall, and of course with all the rules and regulations, with coaches when you can go in. And so it makes it really difficult, to build on that high school talent. So a lot of these guys, like you see, they go to a place like Washington State, they go to San Diego State, and similar to like what you do in the NFL, you're trying to go to a team that maybe you can develop in. And I think that's why that's what makes the portal so interesting because, even though we're talking about some of these players, some of the high value players that I as a coach want to make an investment are quarterbacks that are coming out of Washington State because, like you said, they've been really productive, and guys like this, I feel like they have a little bit of rawness to them because they haven't been handed everything like you would be in an SEC quarterback coming in as a 5-star, or even an ACC quarterback, or playing at Ohio State. So I really like the raw factor because I think that you can, when you get a quarterback, especially at that position, they're so pivotal and a necessity to making this offense run. Your quarterback doesn't have it in tune, then your offense is going to be on shake. So I think, we're going to see more guys, especially from the high school or even from smaller schools. They're going to go to smaller schools or they're going to hit the portal, up their value, similar like what you do in the NFL. And then they're going to come out and say, hey, look, I've made a proving ground with these limited resources, not the best, cast, but I've still been productive. And I think that's what makes it enticing as far as that. So I feel like a lot of these guys are going to be a lot more high value when they hit the portal than when they come out of high school. And I think that's the trend we're going to see now in the upcoming, in the 26 class and the 27 class, as far as high school recruiting, as a lot of guys are going to try to figure out how do we work the system. I'm a 4-star player, but I don't got a lot of offers right now. I got a lot of kids right now in some of the best talented schools out of Georgia, out of Texas, that are 3-star, 4-star, and 5-stars that don't have people knocking on their door, and they're still on the board. And you're like, how are these kids not getting offers? Well, they're not getting eyes on them. So a lot of them, they're willing to go even, smaller schools, smaller D1 schools and up their stock. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that kind of trend as far as the high school into the transfer. And then I feel like bigger schools are going to take a look at these guys because they can get a lot more high value players that they can develop versus investing in one, a Walter Nolan or Jahan Otis and not have a lot to spend across the board and still be in the predicament that, hey, we still got to build a roster, but we spent all this money on a really elite guy. not taking away from that guy's talent. But remember, when you go buy a lot of 4 and 5 stars, whether it be from the portal, whether it be from the high school, that takes away from the guys that you can spread the wealth, where you really need to have depth and where you really need to develop, especially to be successful in a place like the SEC.
Absolutely. And Small Time Republic makes this comment. There should be one portal window in late April, early May that would solve a lot of this. There is a portal window in April and May. So as soon as spring practice is over for everyone, there is a portal window. Yes. The portal window has been reduced, but there still is a portal window at the end of spring practice.
And that's also another question, because a lot of these guys that you might sign from the portal, they might not like the way things are looking in spring season and spring ball. And, that's why it's another thing. You have to be careful who you invest in and who you pick, because you also have to look at this kid's character. Are they going to jump ship because they're not the number one guy? So that's another thing that, another question that we see during the late season portal, as far as after spring ball is concerned. Some of these guys that we recruited and we invested in say, hey, not really my fit. Sorry, I'm gonna take the money and I'm gonna go. And that's not a case in everything, but yeah, that's another scenario we see with the late portal. You're gonna see a lot of guys that aren't happy, or early enrollees, that said, hey, I thought this was gonna be the fit, but it's not. But a lot to talk about. We definitely went longer than we expected, but I'm just gonna wrap up here because we still have to talk a little bit about high school recruiting, Mark. Of course, we are in gold ball season, and it's narrowing, of course, the places I spend a lot of time in between Georgia and Texas. Of course, 2 powerhouse programs went down. Duncanville, the Dreams, Keelan Russell, he's officially ready for Alabama because they were defeated by North Crowley, in the 6A. And then, of course, we had North Shore, who is the epitome of a program coming out of Houston. Didn't think anybody could stop them, but they were stopped this weekend. So they will not be, and these are 2 nationally ranked teams, but a lot of recruits coming out of there. But I do want to showcase a program that I've covered a lot, that's making its 2nd state run, and they will be headed back to the Benz tomorrow in Atlanta to try to vie for their 5A state championship, is the Milton Eagles. They will be heading up Georgia state champions. Shifts start today for the different state titles, but that's a team. We had obviously Kyle on from the Auburn beat, another guy I know that they're excited to get that I've watched at Ole Miss was after, with tight end Ryan G, 3-4 star, coming out, really talented kid that I think will really develop really nice in Auburn. And he will be a kid to watch. But some kids that I do want to mention that are still on the board that we see a lot of it. I just mentioned there's a lot of talented kids, but for coaches out there that are heading to the state championships, looking at Milton has found a lot of success with Ben Reeves and his staff because they are a team that has built a lot on young talent. So it can be done. And these are kids that don't have a lot of offers. But I mean, right now on the board, you see Georgia commit CJ Wiley, one of the best wide receivers. He's headed to Georgia. Ryan G, obviously the tight end, a top tight end, committed to Auburn. There's a lot of guys. TJ Lester, one of the most underrated quarterbacks, going to I think it's Southern, not Georgia Southern, but it's one of the schools down in Georgia. So apologize for that. One of the most talented running backs. I wouldn't be surprised if he were to ever hit the portal, that he were to come up. But 2 kids I do want to mention out in Milton to watch out for that are still on the board 2025. A talented wide receiver, Tristan Payne, had 9 touchdowns, 823 yards, 52 carries. Really, really talented. He is a kid that does not have a lot of offers, but if you're still looking for a top kid, I'm telling you, go out to Georgia, Atlanta, make it in the Benz. Milton produces top kids across the border. There's a reason that they are in back-to-back state championship. Another talented defensive player, Hayden Shermia. Another thing I want to bring out about this kid, academic All-American, maintains a 4.2. When you see his numbers and when you see him on tape and when you see him on person, and I've watched these 2, they have been impact players. Like I said, a lot of the kids that I mentioned, CJ Wiley, some of the defensive line, Ryan G, some really talented kids that get all the praise that have been an impact for this team heading into their 2nd state championship for Milton. But it's these 2 names that I mentioned have also been impact players. So there's a lot of still talented kids out of the board. So like I said, coaches, go out and make these state championships. You know, you're looking to build your roster on transfer portal, but I say you got to also build yourself on young talent like that.
Folks, we've got an Ole Miss show that comes your way each and every Wednesday. That's on the Ole Miss channel. Leanne, myself, Ruby Dreher, every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So please check it out. And just coming down, Malik Murphy is in Lexington, Kentucky today, checking out the Wildcats and Mark Stoops. So the news just continues. Leanne, appreciate you being here as always. And we will be back at it on Tuesday. And again, everyone, the Ole Miss show on Wednesday. So more transfer portal news and notes, I'm sure, to run down. There'll be something that's going to happen. A zillion things that will happen here in the next.
I'm sure we will have some commitments and surprises and some new visitors and some new hot guys on the board, as I like to say. Anyway, but thank you for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow again for all your portal updates and all your news.